the gangster the mafia couldn't tame. He wasn't Italian, he wasn't strategic, and he didn't follow the rules. He was young, fearless, and unpredictable. So unpredictable that even the mafia, who lived by violence, decided he was too dangerous to exist. By the time he was 23, his name was whispered with both fear and disgust. He didn't just cross lines, he obliterated them. He didn't care about territory, loyalty, or codes of silence. He cared about power, and he wanted it now. This is the story of Vincent "Mad Dog" Coll, a boy born into poverty, raised on violence, and remembered as the gangster even gangsters were afraid of. Born into nothing. The year was 1908. In the rugged, windswept hills of County Donegal, Ireland, a baby was born into a world that offered nothing but hardship. His name was Vincent Coll, though the streets of New York would come to know him as Vincent Coll, and later Mad Dog. Life in Donegal was unforgiving, poor, isolated, and hard. The Coll family, like many others, saw America not as a country, but as a chance, a desperate hope. They scraped together what little they had and boarded a ship headed for New York City, joining the wave of Irish immigrants chasing the American dream. But the Bronx didn't welcome them with open arms. Instead, the Colls found themselves shoved into a cramped tenement in one of New York's most brutal boroughs. The streets outside were filled with gangs, hunger, and hopelessness. Crime wasn't a choice, it was a way to survive. Vincent's father worked hard but earned little. There were too many mouths to feed. Too many cold winters. Too many nights when the heat wouldn't come on and the food ran out before payday. By age 7, Vincent had already learned how to steal. Not because he wanted to, but because he had to. Bread from bakeries, fruit from carts, even coins from church baskets. He became fast, not just with his hands, but with his thinking. He knew how to slip into the shadows, how to lie without blinking, how to flash a smile while planning something darker. He never truly belonged, not in school, not in the neighborhood, not even in his own family. Anger burned in him early, and when teachers or priests tried to discipline him, he lashed out, sometimes violently. He was expelled from school before he could even spell the word future. By age 12, Vincent was fully immersed in street life. He joined a local gang of Irish kids, running errands for older thugs. He'd deliver packages, intimidate store owners, and act as a lookout for illegal card games. He wasn't just fearless, he was addicted to danger. He carried a knife before most kids carried a lunchbox. But even among petty criminals, Vincent stood out. He had a short fuse, a tendency to explode when someone crossed him. And when he fought, he didn't stop until the other person couldn't get up. That earned him respect and fear. By 14, Vincent dropped out of school completely. He was arrested several times for assault, robbery, and carrying concealed weapons, but he always slipped through the cracks. Sometimes charges were dropped. Sometimes no one wanted to testify. Sometimes the victims were too scared to speak. Even the police began to take notice, not because he was a big name, but because of how violently he reacted to even the smallest disrespect. He didn't wait for orders. He didn't ask for permission. And that made him dangerous in a city crawling with organized crime. While most Irish youth dreamed of jobs, unions, or maybe joining Tammany Hall, Vincent had different plans. He didn't want politics. He didn't want family. He wanted power, and he didn't care how many people he had to go through to get it. By the time he was 17, Vincent Coll was no longer a small-time street hustler. He was a rising threat, one that the gangs of New York couldn't ignore any longer. Baptized in blood, Coll joins the underworld. By the early 1920s, New York wasn't a city, it was a battlefield. Prohibition had turned liquor into gold. Bootleggers became kings, and turf wars spilled into streets like rainstorms that never stopped. In this chaotic world of bribes, bullets, and betrayals, Vincent Coll was ready to climb. He had no connections, No family backing, and no name recognition. What he had was raw nerve, violent instinct, and the kind of rage that couldn't be taught, only unleashed. In the back alleys of the Bronx, his name started circulating. He was the kid who didn't flinch, who would take on anyone, anytime, without asking why. Word of mouth brought him to the attention of one man who valued unpredictability over loyalty: Dutch Schultz. Dutch was one of the most powerful mobsters in New York at the time, known for running liquor, rackets, and numbers out of Harlem and beyond. He wasn't Italian, so he wasn't part of the mafia, but he played the game with the same brutality. He was always looking for men who could get things done quickly and without emotion. That's exactly what Vincent Coll was. When Coll first met Schultz in 1927, he was only 19, but already had the reputation of a man twice his age. Schultz didn't waste time. He handed Coll a job: shake down a stubborn speakeasy owner who refused to pay protection. Most gangsters would have threatened the man, maybe roughed him up. Vincent walked into the club in broad daylight, grabbed the owner by the throat in front of customers, and put a bullet in the floor just inches from his head. The man paid up on the spot. Schultz smiled. From that day forward, Vincent Coll became one of Schultz's trusted enforcers. But trusted didn't mean safe. Everyone knew that Vincent had a temper. He was quick to act, slow to think, and impossible to control. But Schultz figured that could be an asset, at least for now. For the next year, Coll's jobs got dirtier. He wasn't just collecting payments anymore. He was dealing with traitors, informants, and enemies of the crew. When someone needed to disappear, Coll was the call. He was fast with a gun, faster with a blade, and absolutely fearless. People began to say he didn't just hurt people, he enjoyed it. But there was something else boiling under the surface, something even Schultz didn't see coming: ambition. Coll wasn't content with being the muscle. He saw the money being made, the deals being cut, and the power in the hands of men he didn't respect. Dutch Schultz treated him like a tool, valuable but replaceable. Vincent wanted to run things, and when someone like Vincent wants more and the man above him says no, someone's going to bleed. The tension between Coll and Schultz grew slowly. Schultz started giving him fewer jobs. Others in the crew began avoiding Coll, calling him too hot-headed. But Vincent took it as an insult. He felt betrayed, and betrayal, in Vincent's world, could only be answered one way. By 1928, Vincent "Mad Dog" Coll was no longer just an enforcer. He was a man sharpening his knives, getting ready to bite the hand that fed him. A beast within, violent rise through Dutch Schultz's ranks. By the time Vincent Coll turned 20, he wasn't just a soldier in Dutch Schultz's army. He was a storm moving through the Bronx. He had the muscle, he had the reputation, and now he wanted control. Dutch Schultz saw the danger. At first, he used Coll like a wild dog, unleashing him when fear was needed. But as Coll grew bolder, Schultz grew cautious. He started passing over Vincent for key assignments. He assigned others to watch him, whispered orders, quiet distance. But nothing in Vincent Coll's world stayed quiet for long. He noticed, and he didn't like it. Coll started doing jobs without Schultz's permission, breaking into liquor warehouses, hijacking rival trucks, even stealing from Schultz's own shipments when he thought no one would notice. But people noticed, and the streets began talking. Vincent's gone rogue. He's building his own crew. He's not taking orders anymore. And it was true. Coll had started recruiting his own loyalists, young, violent men like himself, mostly Irish, hungry for power. They called themselves the Coll Gang, and their symbol wasn't a logo or a handshake, it was chaos. They didn't just rob speakeasies, they stormed them. They didn't just warn enemies, they silenced them. And Coll, he was finally the one giving the orders. But with power came recklessness. One night in 1930, Coll and his crew stormed a Harlem nightclub that was under Schultz's protection. The place was packed, music thumped, drinks flowed. Coll walked in like he owned the joint and demanded $5,000 in protection fees from Schultz's own clients. When the owner refused, Coll's men trashed the bar, fired shots into the ceiling, and beat 2 employees half to death. No one was safe, not even Schultz's allies. Word traveled fast. Dutch was furious. Coll had crossed the line. But when Schultz confronted him days later in a dark alley behind a Bronx pool hall, Coll didn't flinch. In fact, he smiled. "You needed me to scare people. Now they're terrified. I did my job." Schultz didn't say a word. But the look in his eyes made one thing clear. Coll wasn't an employee anymore. He was a threat. The tension boiled over days later when a trusted Schultz associate turned up in the river, face down, with 2 shots in the back. Police had no suspects, but everyone in the underworld knew it had Vincent's signature all over it. By now, even Coll's own men were nervous. He wasn't strategic. He wasn't cautious. He acted on rage, not reason. And while that made him dangerous, it also made him unpredictable. And unpredictability in organized crime, that's a death sentence. The mafia began to notice. Coll wasn't just disrupting Schultz's operations. He was drawing attention, headlines. He didn't care about the code. He didn't follow the silent rules of the underwood. In late 1930, whispers began swirling through the city. Vincent Coll needs to be dealt with. But Coll, oblivious, or maybe just uncaring, pressed harder. He started targeting Schultz's top lieutenants, hitting liquor trucks in broad daylight, walking into clubs protected by the Italian families, and making demands like he owned the city. To Coll, this was just a war, a path to dominance. To everyone else, this was madness. Even his allies were unsure what scared them more: the bullets flying for rival gangs or the unfiltered rage of their own leader. He was becoming something untethered, a creature that didn't fear death or consequence, a beast within the system. And New York, already drowning in violence, had no idea just how much worse things were about to get. Betrayal and blood turning on Dutch Schultz. By 1931, the tension between Vincent Coll and Dutch Schultz had boiled past its limit. What began as silence turned into stares. What began as stares turned into blood in the gutters. Vincent wasn't just going rogue anymore. He was declaring war on his own boss, on the man who once made him rich, on the underworld itself. Dutch Schultz tried to control it quietly. He sent warnings, offered money, even tried using mutual connections to reason with Coll. But Coll didn't want peace. He wanted power. And there was only room for one king. Coll didn't send a message. He sent a bullet. One of Dutch Schultz's most trusted bodyguards, a man named Johnny Hine, was found shot near the Harlem River. 238 slugs in his back. Schultz knew instantly who was behind it. Coll wasn't hiding. He was sending a signal: "I'm coming for the throne." And from that moment on, New York erupted. Schultz responded the only way he knew how: with force. He put out a contract on Coll's head. $25,000 to anyone who could find him. Alive or gone, it didn't matter. Coll answered by doubling down. He formed a kill squad, a crew of wild Irish gangsters willing to do anything for fast money and faster reputation. They had no rules, no code, no discipline. They were arsonists in a city made of gasoline. What followed was a bloodbath. Drive-by shootings lit up Harlem. Safe houses were firebombed. Schultz's men began disappearing one by one. Some found dumped in alleys, others never found at all. At least 12 men were taken out in the span of just 2 months. Most of them linked directly to Schultz. One night, 2 of Schultz's men were gunned down in a parked car near the Bronx Zoo. Witnesses said they never even saw who did it. They were sitting, talking, and then glass shattered and bullets poured in. Vincent wasn't just fighting for turf. He was proving a point. He didn't care who you were: soldier, boss, friend, enemy, it didn't matter. If you stood in his way, you vanished. But the war turned public in a way no one expected, the moment a child got caught in the crossfire. February 1st, 1931, Harlem. Coll's crew had tracked a Schultz lieutenant to a busy street corner. They opened fire from a speeding car, riddling the sidewalk with bullets. Their target got away, but a 5-year-old boy named Michael Vengali didn't. He was hit in the stomach, taken to the hospital. He didn't survive. New York froze. The newspapers exploded. The public cried out. Even hardened mobsters went silent. And for the first time, the name Vincent Coll didn't just circulate through police files and underworld whispers. It was on the front page, and it came with a new name, Mad Dog. The tabloids branded him as a menace, a rabid animal, a killer with no code. The mayor of New York called him a baby butcher. Coll denied everything, claiming it was Schultz who staged the shooting to frame him. But it didn't matter. The damage was done. The mafia, who had once tolerated his ambition, now wanted him erased, not because he attacked Schultz, but because he had crossed the line every criminal knew never to cross: civilians, especially children. And so, the order spread silently. Find him, silence him. For Vincent Coll, the war was no longer about territory. It was about survival.
The tragedy that branded him Mad Dog.
It was the bullet that missed its mark that finally broke Vincent Coll. February 1st, 1931, on a freezing day in Harlem, he sent his men to silence a Schultz lieutenant. But when the dust settled, the intended target was gone, and a 5-year-old child lay dying on the pavement. His name was Michael Vengali. He was playing with a ball. He was innocent, and now he was gone. The public reaction was instant and unforgiving. Newspapers splashed the child's face across the front page. Blood-stained concrete, tiny shoes, a mother's scream, every detail printed in bold ink. Headlines screamed, "Gunman slaughters child in gangland ambush. Murderous maniac terrorizes city. Find this mad dog before he strikes again." It was the New York Daily News that first branded him the name that would stick for the rest of his life: Mad Dog Coll. That label hit harder than any bullet ever could. Overnight, Vincent Coll became public enemy number.
The mayor of New York, Jimmy Walker, took to the airwaves, calling Coll a heartless little savage, and issued a personal demand to police: bring him in, dead or alive. The NYPD formed a special task force. Detectives were ordered to raid every known safe house. $10,000 reward posters flooded the city, showing Coll's mugshot and the words, "Wanted for child homicide." But Vincent didn't run. Instead, he went on the offensive. Coll knew he was losing control of the narrative, so he did something unexpected. He turned himself in. A few days after the killing, Vincent Coll calmly walked into a police precinct with his lawyer. His tie was straight, his hat was clean, and his smile was cold. "I didn't do it," he said. "This is a setup." He claimed the whole thing was orchestrated by Dutch Schultz to frame him, to turn the city against him, to take him out without lifting a finger. Whether that was true or not didn't matter. The city wanted blood, and now the courtroom became. The trial that followed was pure theater.
Press crowded the benches. Reporters sat elbow to elbow with mobsters.
Everyone wanted a look at the man who'd become the face of unhinged street violence.
Coll sat through it all with a grin. He joked with guards, winked at reporters, laughed when the prosecution described him as a rabid, frothing dog. He was young, barely 23, and to some he looked more like a movie star than a gangster. And somehow, he beat the charge. His lawyer tore apart the evidence, arguing there was no proof Coll was even near the scene. The eyewitnesses crumbled on cross-examination. The murder weapon was never found. And when the jury returned, they said the words no one expected: "Not guilty." Gasps filled the courtroom. Outside, protesters screamed, mothers cried,
Even the judge shook his head in disbelief. But legally, Vincent Mad Dog Coll walked free.
Still, the damage was done. The courtroom might have cleared him, but the public had already passed its sentence. To them, he was a monster, a loose cannon, a gangster who'd gone so far off the rails that even the mafia wanted nothing to do with him. And for the first time in his life, Coll felt it. The isolation. His allies evaporated. His crew thinned out. Money stopped flowing. His name, once respected in criminal circles, became a curse. He wasn't feared anymore. He was hated. Every time he walked down the street, eyes followed, not with respect, but with fear that another bullet might fly, that someone might take a shot at him just to make it stop. And Dutch Schultz, he didn't say a word. He didn't need to. Behind the scenes, he doubled the price on Coll's head. 50,000. Dead, not captured, not silenced, just gone. Vincent didn't know it yet, but the countdown had begun. And this time, no courtroom would save him. Hunted by the mafia and the law. The courtroom had cleared his name, but the streets never forgave. Vincent Mad Dog Coll was now free in the eyes of the law, but in the shadows of New York he was marked. The mafia had seen enough. The police were still after him, and Dutch Schultz had made up his mind. Vincent was a problem that had to be erased. He wasn't just a rival now. He was a lightning rod for heat, media, and chaos. The mafia ran on quiet deals and silent power. Vincent ran on explosions, headlines, and gunfire. His very existence was a threat to the balance they'd built. So the city turned into a trap. Every bar stool might hide a hitman. Every car that passed might carry a rifle. Every friend from yesterday might be bought by tonight. Vincent's world collapsed into paranoia. He stopped staying in one place more than a few nights. Cheap hotels, back alleys. He rotated cars, used payphones, wore hats pulled low. He only trusted one man, Tommy Gennaro, his childhood friend turned bodyguard, and even Tommy had noticed. Vince, we're running out of shadows to hide in. Vincent still had his pride, though. Even in hiding, he couldn't let go of the gangster dream. He kept making calls, kept trying to rebuild. He'd phone old allies in Queens or Jersey, trying to raise money, muscle, respect. But the responses were cold. You're too hot, Vince. No one wants to be seen with you. Even the cops are scared of what comes next. The mafia didn't put a bounty on him with a whisper. They broadcasted it. $50,000, dead. Not a warning, not an arrest, just a final, silent end. Coll began to disappear from the headlines, but only because the public assumed he was already gone. Rumors flew.
He fled to Boston. He was hiding in Canada. He'd been taken out by his own men.
But he was still in New York, slipping between safe houses, never staying still. At night, he'd sit in hotel rooms, staring out the window with a pistol on the table, waiting for the sound of footsteps or a knock that never came. He rarely slept. When he did, it was in pieces. A minute here, 10 there. The kind of sleep hunted men fall into when their body gives out before their brain can rest. And all the while, Schultz's men kept looking. So did the cops. They weren't satisfied with his acquittal. They wanted him off the streets. For anything. Racketeering, illegal guns, armed assault. If he slipped up once, they'd be ready. But Vincent wasn't slipping. He was rotting from the inside.
His gang had all but collapsed. Money was gone. Allies were gone. Even Tommy Gennaro started to doubt. One night, Vincent sat in a diner at 2 a.m., nervously watching the front door while Tommy whispered, "You know, Vince, you could just disappear. Start over. Mexico, maybe. Cuba." Coll didn't answer, because starting over meant giving up. And Vincent Coll didn't know how to do that. Instead, he made one last move, a desperate reach for relevance. He tried to set up a deal with one of the Italian families, thinking maybe, just maybe, they'd take him in, use his chaos, rebrand his rage. He picked up the phone from a small drugstore in Midtown Manhattan, a simple public booth near the corner of 8th Avenue and 23rd Street.
He placed the call. The deal was in motion. But what he didn't know was this. Dutch Schultz's men were listening. The last call. A phone booth full of bullets. February 8th, 1932. It was a gray afternoon in Manhattan. The kind of day when people hurried under coats, heads down, minds on warmth. But inside a tiny drugstore on 8th Avenue and 23rd Street, one man stood still. Vincent, Mad Dog Coll. He stepped into a phone booth. The glass door closed behind him. He lit a cigarette, placed a call, and leaned into the receiver. His tone was calm, focused, almost hopeful. This was supposed to be a deal. Coll had arranged a meeting with Owney Madden, a powerful figure from Hell's Kitchen, who had mafia ties and business interests in Harlem. Coll believed that maybe, just maybe, he could find protection. A second chance, a return to power. What he didn't know was that Madden had already made his decision. Because Owney Madden wasn't just a gangster, he was a businessman, and harboring Vincent Coll meant choosing chaos over profit. The mafia had already labeled Coll a threat to every racket in the...
And no one sided with chaos. Not when it carried a $50,000 price tag. As Coll spoke into the phone, his bodyguard Tommy Gennaro stood nearby, browsing candy shelves, eyes constantly shifting toward the entrance. He didn't see it happen. No one did, until it was too late. At exactly 5:30 p.m., a black sedan rolled up to the curb outside. Inside were 4 men, all of them armed, all of them quiet. No words, no shouting, no second thoughts. They knew exactly what had to be done. One stepped out, pushed open the drugstore door, and calmly raised a Thompson submachine gun. In seconds, the world changed. The glass door of the phone booth exploded. Bullets ripped through the panels, through Vincent's coat, chest, jaw, neck, skull. More than 15 shots in under 5 seconds. Screams burst from every corner of the store as customers dove for cover. Bottles shattered and shelves collapsed under the spray. Vincent Coll never even turned around. He died with the phone's still eye. Cigarette burning between his fingers. Mouth slightly open, like he was about to say one last thing. By the time Tommy Gennaro hit the floor, it was already over. The shooter disappeared into the waiting car. Tires screeched, no license plate, no witnesses willing to talk. Just the sound of the phone still dangling from the wire, buzzing with an unanswered line. Police arrived within minutes. They found Coll slumped inside the booth, unrecognizable except for the broken receiver tangled in his hand. Blood pooled beneath the door. Shell casings scattered across the linoleum. One detective, a seasoned officer from homicide, stared at the scene and muttered, "They didn't take chances, did they?" No, they didn't. The message was crystal clear. No trial, no debate, just a clean end to a messy man. And just like that, Vincent Mad Dog Coll was gone. At 23 years old, the newspapers exploded the next morning. But this time, the tone had changed. Mad Dog gunned down in Vincent Coll meets violent end. Phone booth execution silences notorious gunman. There was no sympathy, no mourning, just relief. The police offered no suspects. The press didn't press too hard. The public moved on. Everyone knew who did it and why, even if no one said it out loud. Vincent had burned too many bridges, crossed too many lines, and spat in too many faces. In a city run by codes, alliances, and silence, he was the noise no one could tolerate. Legacy of a rabid dog, feared, hated, forgotten. When the dust settled and Vincent Coll's blood was mopped from the linoleum floor of that Manhattan drugstore, one question lingered in every smoky backroom and dimly lit bar in New York. What did he leave behind? No empire, no fortune, no loyal army. Just a name, a myth, and a warning. In the days after his death, the press dissected his life like vultures around a carcass. But the tone was no longer shocked or horrified. It was final. His story had reached its inevitable ending. He didn't fade out slowly. He didn't grow old. He didn't cut deals, retire, or vanish into the Caribbean.
He went out the way everyone expected him to, loud, messy, and alone. The New York Times ran a single photo, the shattered phone booth, glass cracked, receiver still bangling. No caption needed. It was an obituary in image form. Mad Dog Coll, taken out by the code he ignored. And in the underworld, that's how they remembered him. Not as a kingpin, not as a leader, but as a lesson. He was the gangster who played too wild for the game. Even the mafia, no strangers to brutality, viewed Coll's path as reckless. He hadn't built, he hadn't protected, he hadn't honored the silent rules that kept the system running. He had broken the balance, and for that, he became an example whispered to younger men. You want to end up like Mad Dog? That name, Mad Dog, stuck not because it described a killer, but because it described something worse, a man out of control. Someone who let ego overpower caution, who let rage overwrite reason, who didn't know when to stop pushing. He left behind no heirs, no crew to carry on the fight. His name faded from the streets almost as fast as it exploded onto the headlines. By the end of the 1930s, most people had already forgotten him. Only in crime archives and mugshot databases did his photo remain. Only in the memories of old detectives and hardened mobsters was he spoken of, usually with a shake of the head and a sip of something strong. But then something strange happened. Decades later, Hollywood came calling. Books began to mention his name again. Documentaries placed him alongside Capone, Luciano, Dutch Schultz, gangsters with legacies, even if his was more ghost than monument. In 1961, a film titled Mad Dog Coll hit theaters. It painted Vincent as a wild, tragic anti-hero, the kind of man who never fit in, who was cursed by the world around him. It wasn't accurate, but it was compelling. And that's the thing about legends. Truth is the first thing they abandon. In pop culture, Coll became more than a cautionary tale. He became entertainment. His name lived on through noir scripts and crime novels, in whispered retellings on late-night shows and smoky poker tables. But the real Vincent, the real Mad Dog, he was buried in St. Raymond's Cemetery in the Bronx, not far from where his story began. No grand tomb, no flowers, just a grave with a name carved into cold stone, surrounded by silence. If you visit, no one stands there long. There are no tours, no fans, just wind and grass and the faint hum of distant traffic. Because Vincent Coll didn't leave behind power or legacy. He left behind a warning that even in a world of outlaws, even among killers and thieves, there are limits. Lines you don't cross, codes you don't violate. Not for your sake, but for theirs. And when you ignore those codes, when you chase your own legend at the expense of everyone else, you don't get remembered as a king. You get remembered. The final echo, when the streets forget your name. Vincent Coll came into the world with nothing. No wealth, no opportunity, no path. Just dirt on his boots and anger in his blood. By the time he was 12, he had learned the city didn't offer kindness. It offered corners, weapons, and hard men with harder fists. The rules weren't printed in books. They were written in bruises and whispered in alleyways. And Vincent, he didn't just learn the rules, he spit on them. He never wanted to wait his turn, never believed in structure. While others built empires slowly, one payoff at a time, he kicked down doors and took what he wanted. Fast, loud, violent. In a world where most criminals rose through favors and alliances, Vincent Coll rose through fear. Not strategy, not loyalty, just fear. And fear? It doesn't last. The ones who built with patience, Luciano, Costello, Lansky, they lasted because they understood the power of silence, of loyalty, of respect. Vincent never did. To him, the only thing that mattered was now. He didn't see the long game. He didn't plan for tomorrow. And by the time he realized the walls were closing in, He had already lit too many fires, made too many enemies, crossed too many lines. He thought being feared meant being untouchable. But in the underworld, there's a rule older than bullets. When you scare the wrong people, they don't fight you. They erase you. Vincent was fast. He was unpredictable. He was dangerous. But he was never protected. And that's what made him vulnerable in a city full of killers with rules. He didn't just make the law want him gone. He made the criminals want him gone even more. So when the end came, it didn't come with betrayal. It didn't come with an ambush from a friend. It came in a way perfectly suited to the life he lived. Sudden, brutal, cold in a glass phone booth, on a gray February evening, while trying to make one last deal. A handful of bullets ended a man who spent his entire life running straight into danger. No bodyguards returned fire. No gang went to war in his name. No city mourned. Vincent Coll was 23 years old when the world erased him. And today, his name barely lives outside old books, black and white films, or the memories of history fanatics. He isn't celebrated like Capone. He isn't studied like Luciano. He isn't idolized like Dillinger. Because Coll never built anything. He just destroyed. He was lightning in a bottle. Impressive, wild, unforgettable, but only for a flash. And when the flash is over, there's only smoke. The underworld didn't revere him. It survived him. Because to the world of organized crime, Vincent Mad Dog Coll wasn't a leader. He was a warning. A message to anyone who thinks rage is a substitute for power. To anyone who believes fear will protect them forever. To anyone too young, too hungry, too reckless to know when to stop. The message is simple. Burn too bright, and the streets won't remember your light. They'll only remember the ashes. So the next time someone tells you about a legend who couldn't be controlled, a gangster who broke every rule and still tried to rewrite history, remember this: legends are only written by survivors. And Vincent Coll, he didn't survive long enough to write his.
The case may be closed, but criminology never sleeps. Like and subscribe at Join Criminology and step deeper into the dark with us.